It's been a long journey to kind of get to this first session. So, it's just wonderful to be here with you all. I'm really excited for the community that's, going to be starting around accessibility in Tableau. I was just talking to Emily before we started that, one of my biggest hopes for this tug is that we have a group of people who can give each other the sort of feedback that we need and that second pair of eyes to be really cognizant of accessibility in Tableau. I'm a firm believer that nobody knows everything and everybody knows something. So the more people that we can get together to think about this, the better.
Absolutely.
So just a agenda of how this next hour and a half or so is going to go. We're going to do a round of introductions around the room. So this is going to be an opportunity for everybody to say who they are. And, in the theme of accessibility, you can do this in the way that works for you. If you're somebody who likes to turn on your camera and your microphone and introduce yourself, that's fine. If you'd rather stay camera off, that's fine as well. If you'd rather introduce yourself in the chat when it comes around to you, that's also fine. All about providing different pathways towards this. But we'll do some introductions. Then we have a great case study. We've got Christian Felix here to talk through a case study with the US Paralympic Committee and a dashboard that Emily and Christian collaborated on for that. And then I'm going to have a short presentation about the concept of universal design, which dovetails well with accessibility. They're not exactly the same thing, but just talking a little bit about what universal design is, and then some ideas for universal design in Tableau. And then we're going to go back to kind of a roundtable structure where everybody can chime in about what their hopes are to get from this accessibility tug. We're just getting started and really we're building this all together. And so Emily and I want to know, what do you want to see from this? What do you hope for it? So we'll have that at the end and then talk about what's next. All right, so introductions. I can kick it off and then hand it over to Emily, and then maybe what makes this most sense is for me to just kind of call on people so that we make sure we get through everybody. So my name here is Colin. I work for the Information Lab. I was part of their data school sort of data apprenticeship program in the UK. And now I'm here working for their New York office, helping start a new data school program in the United States. And what leads me here today, so I started thinking about accessibility while I was in the data school. We have these weeks between consulting placements where we kind of get to work on personal projects. And one of those weeks I chose to think about accessibility. And to be honest, I was kind of like horrified when I started looking into like screen readers and keyboard controls for Tableau, just how difficult and unintuitive a lot of this stuff was to deal with. And I thought that this was a huge space in my company that just nobody was thinking about and occupying. And so I decided to build a training that's now incorporated into all of our consultant training around accessibility. And yeah, I still feel like I'm very much at the beginning of my accessibility journey. I'm still learning more every single day about it. And that's why I'm interested to hear from you all and learn from your all's experience. So with that, I will pass it over to Emily.
Well, thanks, Colin. So my name is Emily. My pronouns are she and her, and people would describe me as a white woman with dark hair with some purple highlights, and I wear computer glasses. My journey to accessibility actually got started in like 2003 when I was working in the public sector and I was a system administrator. And in the federal government in the US, everything that we do needs to be accessible for 508, Section 508 compliance. So I was a system administrator for a comparative analysis report known as the car. And because it was external, we prioritized that and made sure that the car was accessible. And that really began my one, made me aware of accessibility, but then also some of the challenges, just even with like, wait, why are you putting these accessibility concepts on our car when they're not on the website, and all of those fun discussions. But then when I became involved in the Tableau and the community, I started asking a little bit about accessibility. But it just really wasn't a thing back in like, I don't know, 2014 or so. So I just kind of kept my, I kind of kept interested. And it was really what really made me get more involved in the last few years, and be more passionate about it and do more speaking engagements about it, was because my daughter is neurodiverse, and she has ADHD and dyslexia. And the hardest part, I think, sorry, I'm like looking off because I'm just like recalling, like I can see it as clear as day, Katie sitting around our dining room table, being so frustrated because she already had problems reading, and then somebody used an Arial font, which has mirroring, or imposter letters, I think it is. Yeah, imposter letters, where the capital I looks like the lowercase L. And she was in tears because she just wanted to read and she couldn't read. And that, like, I'll do anything for Katie. So that's really what led me to be more active and work on an industry-wide data viz accessibility working group, and then just amp up my contributions. Yeah, that's a little bit about me. Oh, I work at Red Hat, which I think is great. And I love their inclusivity and their ability to think of us as humans, and that we're different, and that difference is okay. That's perspective. So that's me. Colin, I'll turn it over to you. And sorry, I was a bit long. I get like
No,
so passionate, like I Katie, and she's my why.
yeah, totally. I think it's fine. I love to hear these stories, so that's all good with me. Christian, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Yeah, sure. I'm Christian Felix. I'm a lead solutions engineer at Tableau. Been with Tableau for about a year, working the life sciences vertical. Prior to that, I was with Roche Diagnostics on the customer side, using Tableau every day. Love the tool, love the community. And I'm here today because as was mentioned earlier, actually, let me back up. So Christian Felix, he, him, his, I am a half Puerto Rican, half Irish, and I have olive, sort of darker skin. Hair is increasingly salt, but a bit salt and pepper. And I'm wearing some computer glasses right now. So that's my intro, and just a bit of context for why I'm here. So I work with Emily on an initiative to create some Paralympics visualizations that were accessible. And it was great to hear Emily's introduction on this and hear her passion, and sort of hear the context and the background for why she is so passionate about this topic. And I learned quite a bit from working with her on this about accessibility. So happy to be here as part of the call and part of the meeting.
Cool. Thank you, Christian. I'm just going to go down the list of participants so that I hit everybody. Next person on here is Alicia Ramsey, or Razmi.
Hi all, I'm Alicia. I'm associated with the University of Puget Sound, and it's actually my first time in this Tableau user group, so I'm new here. And what leads me here today is that although my current role up in data doesn't like have a lot of data with talking about accessibility, but I'm interested in learning about accessibility and the crossover with that in my work, and how I can like approach my data with that perspective in mind. So yeah, I just want to learn from everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, Alicia. Next person I see on here is Brittany Rosenau.
Hello, I finally found where my mute button was. Hi everyone, I'm Brittany, she, her. My Zoom background is the conference room from Parks and Rec. Dark hair, wearing glasses. The first time I became aware of accessibility in data viz was in an internship watching a pretty boring presentation about charts, and they pointed out red-green color blindness and how many people that it actually affects, and that if you're only using color for your viz, you've got a good chance at alienating a lot of your audience. So since then, I've been really interested in how can I make vizzes better to not leave anyone out.
Nice. Yeah, I also had that red and green realization. The next person on here is Caroline Sawyer.
Hey, sorry, I was on mute. I am very excited to learn more about accessibility, and we actually do have an executive with color blindness, so very applicable in my everyday work. So looking forward to learning.
Awesome. Thanks, Caroline. Next person I see on here is Christopher DiMartini. It's possible Christopher has stepped away from the moment, so I'll move on to the next person. Christy Kranich.
Sorry, just getting started here. I'm Christy Kranich. I am with the Ohio State University Government Resource Center, and we partner with state departments of Ohio government to help them use their data around measures of health equity. And obviously I'm doing work for a state institution and state government, so we really should be accessible, but I don't know that we always are. I'm newly in a position where my sole focus is data visualization, and I've had a hard time finding information and a hard time thinking about what it means to make a data visualization work for folks with visual impairments, especially.
Awesome. Thanks, Christy. Next person I see on here is Deb.
Hi there. Sorry, just trying to get my video up here. My name is Deborah Timmons, and I work at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau in the US government. And I work on the business intelligence team, so we work very closely with Tableau. And what brings me here today is two things. One, we've been working on a bureau-wide project to look at annual employee survey data, and have been working with our accessibility officer on trying to make sure that that interactive tool is accessible. And through some of that work, we discovered a few bugs and things that, so we've reported those and we've been working on those. But what drew me initially to this discussion, in a previous federal position, one of my employees was blind. And so when I joined the VI team at CFPB, one of my interview questions was, well, what do you do for blind people when you're doing data visualization work? So I've just been very interested in how to make vizzes accessible to folks, and learning from others out there. Having done this project the last year, we've looked at as many resources as we could, but certainly looking for more.
Awesome. Thanks, Deb. Mm-hmm. Zifa, you're the next person on my list.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Zifa Nexo. Pronouns are she, her. I guess for a little bit of a visual description, some dark chocolate skin, some glasses, cute black braids, some gold accessories. And I am a data technology analyst at Curis. And I think why I'm here today is, honestly, it's kind of embarrassing, but I think accessibility has been more of like an afterthought for me. And most of my knowledge has come from, I attended this session, I think it was last year, 2 years ago, from the Data Visualization Society. They had a great session at a conference on accessibility. And I've also been following Emily for some time, but I really want to move from just thinking that it's like red, green, color blindness, and kind of making it more of a proactive approach and really encompassing that into like my database work and just like world like as a whole. So I'm just really excited to like learn and become more knowledgeable and be an advocate. So thank you guys for starting this. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Ziffa. Next person on my list is Ethan Lang.
Hey team, Ethan here. I'm from Playfair Data consulting group. What brought me here today, when I was very young in my career, I actually had an extremely embarrassing moment with a key executive. I built something in Tableau and presented it to him. I didn't double encode my marks and he was colorblind. And he asked me plain blank, he was like, I don't know what 5 million, is that good? Is that bad? I cannot see it. So for me, that was kind of a wake up call. And that's when I really started doing a lot of research into this stuff. So interested in learning more, interested in improving my own work and finding new ways that I can bring value to everybody and make all of my data visualizations accessible to everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, Ethan. The next person I have on my list is Istvan.
Hey, everyone. My name is István Korambay. I'm from Star Schema, which is a Hungarian data consultancy firm. And the reason I'm here, I think it was first Chris DeMartini's content, and then I discovered Frank Alowski's content, and then I sort of got dragged into this rabbit hole of accessibility problems, which ultimately, it was a bit frustrating because we are in our practice are not really doing anything towards accessibility other than using the red-green scale as like a Trojan horse for aesthetic decisions. And so we started like researching it a bit, and now we are preparing a series of blog posts on accessibility specifically in enterprise data visualization. And I have a very selfish reason for being here. I'm fishing for content, and I'm looking for what our community finds interesting and important in this area.
Awesome. I hope we can provide you lots of content. Let's see, who's next on my list? Well, maybe this is an opportunity. Chris DeMartini, since you were mentioned there, if you are back at your computer and want to introduce yourself. Hey.
Hey, can you see me?
Yes.
All right. Sorry. Yeah, I'm kind of multitasking between meetings, so I apologize if you called me earlier and I missed. But I'm Chris DeMartini. I work for Visa during the day, and then I do a bunch of work kind of on my own time with the Tableau community and everything. I was named to the Tableau Visionary Hall of Fame this past year. And a lot of my content publicly can be found on the DataBlick blog. What leads me to being here today is over the past couple of years, I've gotten more and more interested in the accessibility space and like trying to understand where things, are going okay in Tableau for that, and where we need to do work in Tableau, and trying to push the work that needs to be done there as much as I can. So I was really excited to see this tug get stood up. Obviously, Emily's one of my favorite people, so anything she does, I'm happy to support. Yeah, just excited to be here and work with everybody to try and do better.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Next person is Keith Underwood.
Hello all, my name is Keith. I'm an analyst at Portland State University. I was actually on the Tableau user group page, and I saw this group and I was like, oh, this is really cool. I want to make sure that I'm a part of this and join. I had a conversation with someone in my department when I was demoing a new viz that I had created, and I was so focused on being creative and making it look interesting and really cool that a couple things were said, like, oh, this color is actually, kind of hard to read, and this font size is a little small, and is this an accessible font? And I was really frustrated with myself because, you do work and you take pride in what you're doing and you're excited just to share. And it was just kind of like, how did I miss these things? So I told myself that I wanted to just take initiative and be involved and see what was out there and just make sure I was covering all my bases, and because obviously you want to do work that represents everyone and everyone has access to. So I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Keith. Next person is Christina Bryan. All right.
Hi, Christina Bryan. I'm with St. Louis University in the Office of Institutional Research, and I'm just here to learn. I'm pretty sure our dashboards are not accessible, so what I can take back and bring to my colleagues so we can, make our dashboards accessible to everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, Christina. Next person on here is Lawrence Durbin.
Hello, yes, my name is Lawrence Durbin. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm a business intelligence analyst over at Morgan Stanley as my day job. I'm also one of the new Tableau social ambassadors. I lead the Data Pride Tug and the Denver Tugs. What leads me here today is when I first started utilizing Tableau, we started talking about the different color schemes, primarily around color blindness, and working on that and making this as accessible. And in my different roles, it's been trying to find the best way to make things accessible. And, always for me, it's making sure that everyone is seen, heard, and, able to see themselves in data visualizations, and understand themselves. So super excited for this. And learn more and be able to have things as more accessible.
Awesome. Thanks, Lawrence. Next person is Maureen Henry. Are you there, Maureen? All right. After Maureen, it's Max Leipson. Oh, Max, it looks like you're on mute.
First time using Zoom, I guess. Hi, everyone. My name is Max Leipson, pronouns he, him, his. I actually work for Salesforce in our global safety and security analytics team. So supporting our safety and security of all of our Salesforce employees and customers and event attendees. And I think Lawrence summed it up pretty nicely. We want to make sure that the data we present is accessible and useful for everyone, and especially our team, where we're providing pretty important safety and security data to all of our employees, but also to our executives. We want to make sure that everyone has access to the same data and that it's accessible. So really excited to learn some new things.
Yeah, thanks, Max. Next person I see on here is Melissa Miswa.
Hi, I'm Melissa Miswa. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a white woman with long, dirty blonde hair, and I wear black almost every day of my life. I am here at Northwestern University. I'm actually on our Chicago campus in our central sponsored research office. I noticed we have a few folks from other universities here, and I work with primarily internal audience. I think everyone thinks of universities with the student aspect, but actually research is big business. In fact, here we do over $900 million a year in research. So big stuff. I work on communications and infrastructure projects, and a lot of web management. And so that's where my accessibility journey started in the professional context, and making things online more accessible. Also, I do a lot with our training, so making training resources accessible. The training specialist I work with and I have talked a lot about accessibility, and we always feel like we're not doing enough, or not doing all that we should. So it's sort of a perpetual journey. We have used Tableau increasingly over the past few years, and I am just beginning my journey into Tableau. My manager, who does do a lot with Tableau, found out about this tug, and since I have an interest in and do a lot with accessibility and started my Tableau dabbling. This seemed to be a very nice marrying of the two. So I wanted to hit today's session.
Awesome. Thanks, Melissa. Next person on here is Luza.
Hi, friends. I'm Nai. Pronouns are she, her, hers. I am white passing with green eyes, dark hair, and I currently work as a consultant for PwC in the banking and capital markets sector. What brings me here is kind of a long, windy journey. I am learning to claim my identity in this space. I do identify as someone who is disabled, although it's a non-visible disability. That has been the case since around 2013. And at the time I was an undergrad student, really interested in social justice, was working with youth, doing social justice work, and we would always have these debates and discussions. And one of the things that constantly came up was ableism is one of the last isms that we take down, even though it's one of the only isms that can affect anyone at any given moment. And so it's been a journey since that time. I've kind of learned that within the disabled community, there's a lot of different experiences. And so I've just been kind of trying to like bring this world into all the different worlds that I love and am part of, including like the Tableau community. I'm also part of the Tableau Equity Task Force, and I really want to be pushing accessibility with the work that we do. I have a couple different ideas that I'm really excited to do, and I'm really just here to build community and kind of claim my identity in this space.
Great, thanks, Nai. Next person on my list is Roshni.
Hi, my name is Roshni Gohil. I identify with she, her, hers. I am a data analyst at MIT. I work in our investment management company, but prior to that, I worked on the fundraising arm, and before that, in the libraries, and that's where accessibility became a thing. So, libraries are open to all people, most of them. And we had software like JAWS Screen Reader. We had specific computers with this, JAWS installed on it, and that was sort of an intro of, oh, hey, this is a need. The web group and the libraries, one of their sort of projects was to always incorporate usability testing and other just user testing into their work. And so I came by accessibility both from that hey, there's this thing called a screen reader, and hey, usability is a thing. And I didn't really apply it to data viz until a whole lot later. There was a project I was working on, and the most important person in the room kept going back to that traffic light color scheme and wanting tables with traffic light color scheme stuff built into it. And I was like, okay, well, I hate tables. So let me see if we can convince you that maybe there's a better way to visualize this. And then, we were lucky enough to actually have someone who was colorblind, and she, most when we hear about colorblindness, at least in the the European side of things, it's usually males are more likely to be colorblind than women. But we had a lady in our audience, and she was colorblind, and we're like, look at this. It's not just who you might expect. Not only are we likely to have someone colorblind in our audience who's not going to get this traffic light color scheme, but it's just there are other ways of doing this. So sort of like this two-pronged approach to, hey, data visualization is a thing, but hey, when we think about data visualization, it's not just pretty pictures. We've got to think about how else are people getting the data. Is there a table behind the scenes that they need to be able to access if they are someone who's using a screen reader? Or just something as simple as what colors you choose, how they can affect people, whether not just can they see it, but like how can a more or less saturated color actually convey information. So all of that sort of pushed me into the, hey, maybe accessibility and usability, they matter for you for data viz as well. So how can we make that work? So yeah, that's basically me. Thanks for letting me ramble.
Yeah, no, thank you. Next person on the list is Sarah Bartlett.
Hey everyone, my name's Sarah Bartlett. I actually work with Emily at Red Hat, so we do a similar role. In our role at Red Hat, we're partly responsible for training people on how to use Tableau and design best practices and things like that. And so often we see visualizations from across the business that aren't accessible, and we really want to do everything we can to really increase the knowledge of what accessibility means and how to design accessible data visualizations. So I'm here today because I work with Emily. We talk about accessibility a lot. I'm also heavily involved in the Tableau community, a Tableau visionary, and do a lot of work outside of work in the Tableau space. So I think it's important that we all educate ourselves on what accessibility is and how we can actually build more accessible experiences for other people.
Right, thank you, Sarah. Next person is Shubham. Shubham, are you there? Oh, there we go.
Introduced in the chat. Yep.
Great. Introduced in the chat. Excellent. Next person is Tina.
Hey everybody, I am Tina Soltashak. I am the manager for the Office of Data and Analytics for a county in Oregon, where Eugene and the University of Oregon are. And I started in a nonprofit that was specifically focused on particularly underrepresented students, supporting them getting Medicaid and health services. And most of those students had disabilities of various types. And it was kind of brought to my attention a few years ago when people were like, so you're having adults use this software, but it's not really accessible. So how are we ever going to be able to enable adults to work with students that like be able to work in the program and represent the disabilities that the students have, and like being able to see that they can have access. So from there, now that I am working in local government, I feel it's really important, especially as we have a burgeoning program. It's been around for a while using Tableau in the county for multiple years, but there really isn't county-wide use. So now it's the opportunity to figure out how do we bake accessibility in from the ground up and really make sure people learn that it's important and how to do it from the jump instead of trying to like train them all up on the software and then go backwards and say, oh yeah, and don't forget accessibility. So that is what I'm trying to do and why I'm here today.
Awesome. Thanks, Tina. That's the bottom of my list. Did anybody get missed? Did I skip anybody? All right, good job, Colin. I love all these descriptions of our parents. I guess I'll do a little one. I'm a white guy, about 30 years old. I have strawberry blonde hair, wearing tortoiseshell glasses, and I have kind of a reddish mustache and beard. Okay, cool. Well, thank you everybody for those introductions. I really, really appreciate getting to hear all of your stories of how you come into this. And I appreciate you all just engaging with it. I think, you know, it felt important to me in this first session to get to hear everybody's story. So I'm glad we had the time to share that. And I also have to give a call out to Ethan, who kind of gave me the inspiration to just make the time for real introductions in these tugs. So thanks, Ethan, for that. Next up, I'm going to hand it over to Emily, who is going to dive into our case study for today. Emily, I will stop my share and yep, you can take it over.
Thank you. All right, sorry folks, I'm on one monitor and it feels like I am definitely missing my second monitor. So today I thought it would be really awesome to talk a little bit about the journey that we went through with the Team USA Paralympic Viz. There were several visualizations, so we'll just touch on one. And that was one that I was brought in to help with. And then I've got Christian here, who I'll also introduce in a second. But I wanted to share with you just a little bit about one, how I even got involved in this, and then where we were, what we did, kind of the WIP, the work in progress, and where we landed. Because I think that that's a really interesting thing to see, of like that process of how to make something that wasn't accessible into something that is more aesthetically pleasing and accessible. So here was the ask. Create an accessible visualization that Salesforce, Tableau, and Team USA can use on websites, at the US Olympic Training Facility, and in media outlets. Salesforce and Team USA had a partnership, and because they were working with Team USA, who had especially for the Paralympic the Paralympians, and the Paralympics, excuse me, they really felt it was imperative to have accessible visualizations. So Tableau had their own resources starting it. And then, as far as I understand, it was, hey, who do we know that does accessibility? And Mark Bradbourne mentioned, hey, I think Emily can probably help you out. She is somebody who has done some stuff in accessibility. And I share that because one of the things that I learned a long time ago from Paul Benoob was, what's your thing? And accessibility has become my thing. And I would encourage you that if you're interested in it, you can have it be a thing, or have it be somebody, you know, as we build this community, like people can go to you, or you can go to others to get some help when making accessible visualizations. So that was the ask and how I was brought into it. Now, I just have images in here because this was not published out, but this is where it started. So Tableau had a resource who was working on it, and this was their visualization. Actually, when I downloaded the image, the actual image of the athlete that was here in this gray square didn't come over. But effectively what happened, or what we see here, is that there's Team USA, there's some logos on the right, there's this circle or bubble plot for the disciplines, and so you have to click in those bubbles to engage with them. We have a map where you have to click in or hover over to get the data. We've got a bar chart and an image on the bottom left, and then a bar chart kind of at the bottom. And there's filters on here. So if you were to click on a discipline, it would filter the home state. It would filter, I think it filtered the home state, filtered the college, the age, and the team, which would then lead you to this right profile, which gives you information about the athlete. So this is where we started. And how I became involved with it, or I told you how I became, but what I did in my involvement at first was to just assess it, give Tableau an idea of how accessible this visualization was, and some things that perhaps needed to be addressed. So what we did, I reviewed it. So it was under review. And I have here some of my observations. I based these observations, and I will fully admit, I kind of took a shortcut where I looked at Chartability, which was my go-to resource for assessing visualizations. I didn't fill it out, but just kind of used it as a guide to come to identify these observations on that viz I just showed. So for the tab stops, which is basically like where it tabs, like if you were to tab, where does it go? That's probably a very simplistic way to describe that. But what I learned in this was that, oh, the slider filters that were in there that you didn't see, they weren't covered, like they weren't accessible when I tried to tab over to them. And I was like, oh, this needs to be fixed. And I'm not sure if Tableau has actually fixed it yet, but I was like, okay, well, that's an issue. And then the order in which the tab stops, like the order in which they went, it was all messed up. It was going to sport, then school, then state, then so it was just, it was confusing in the order in which it was going to. Zooming, I zoomed in the browser with no issues to the marks, like just everything increased, which was good. The screen reader, so this was something I also learned during this process, was that I'm on a Mac, and the voiceover screen reader ability is actually more friendly than perhaps other screen readers. So I didn't even realize that until we were on a call with Team USA, their accessibility expert, and was like, oh yeah, you just can't use voiceover, which presented a challenge to me since I have a Mac and I don't have Parallels or like another operating system to have Windows, so which is where the other screen readers run. But what I noticed is that it didn't capture the text in the header or the footer of the viz, and that needed to be resolved. And also the data window wasn't enabled, so that needed to be resolved. So it wasn't like I could have this visual, but then had access to the table underneath. I think Roshni talked about that. So that needed to be addressed. And things like the dashboard title, like the header, it met AA, but didn't meet AAA. The white on red also didn't meet AAA. So I kind of went through each of these areas and looked at it, like color contrast, design process, used brand elements, which was good. Things that we needed to follow up on, like what does Team USA prefer? I screenshot my findings so that way somebody could go back to them and see exactly what I was talking about, making sure that my foreground and my background colors were accurate, that I had identified. And so I put this together and sent it over to Tableau. One of the things actually that I didn't have on here, but was when the screen reader read, then the image of Abby Durkin in this example, let me go back for a second. Oops, hold on. There we go. Yeah. So Abby Duncan's image was here, and when the screen reader read it, it was like AB _ headshot 1, which doesn't give you any indication of what it was reading. So renaming the images was also another finding. So there was a lot to work on here. And so it gave us a good starting point to say, okay, well, what this isn't going to work, and we need to come up with another way to make it more accessible. Had I had enough time, I would have filled in everything on Chartability. So that way it was very well documented. And actually, just for reference, I've got Chartability pulled up here. And what I love Chartability. I've joked with Frank that I think I need a percentage of the, I need like a referral fee, even though it's free. Which is my little joke, because I think it is a fantastic resource and I want to share it super quick. Well, I think it's in the chat, but if not, we'll put it in there. But what I love in addition to all of this is that you can get the workbook. So folks who are saying, well, like I need some kind of like checklist, or like we have, like there's something in here, and he's changed it up. So apologies for me scrolling. But you can get Chartability, yeah, there we go, where it talks about the method, the failures, the outcomes, what's critical, how do you use it. He's actually like improved it since it first came out, but you have a set of heuristics that you can check. And it really, I think, does a very good job of helping you understand what's required based on WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And for those folks who are in government, Section 508 was written to be updated to align with, I think, AA of WCAG compliance or standards. So I wanted to share that out because it's just an amazing resource, and that's what I used to help assess each part of the process with this visualization. Okay, so let's keep going here. So that's where we were, that's what I did. So then the pendulum swung the complete opposite way. And this was my, I call it cringy. This is my cringe, but pretty accessible visualization. It was all about getting to know the athletes. I took into consideration, because I had a conversation with Frank and I was like, you know, I need to make this accessible, and I'm using Chartability, and he was telling me, oh, well, one of the major things is like a system state, like letting people know what they've done and what their results are. So I created something that said, here are your results. In this visualization, sorry, this is where I had the sliders. And that's when I found it wasn't, like, the sliders were in here as well. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is not accessible. How are we going to do this? But yeah, it was pretty cringy. The colors, I didn't have the style guidelines, so I used Team USA colors, which are really hard from an accessibility perspective. But it was meant to be a filter, like an interactive, like a filtered view where you could filter and then get the information to learn about the athletes, because that was the whole point of it. What I tried to do, just pointing out a few differences, I have some instructional language here, like select from the options below to learn more. Here are your results. You know, you selected athletes that compete in, right now it's all. How many athletes do we have? Click to learn more. There's going to go a link to their athlete profile page on Team USA. And then this was like a navigational view where they could dig in deeper if they wanted to. So it's very blocky. That's how I think of it. It's very blocky. It's very cringe. And that's where Christian comes in. Because as one resource was rolling off, they were like, you know, who would be great for this? This guy who, you know, he's kind of well known for his vizzes and being creative. He can probably help. So Christian Felix, who's the lead solutions engineer at Tableau, came on board to help. So Christian, let's have a conversation about this journey.
Let's. And if I can actually initiate the conversation by sharing my screen real quick. I know I said I wasn't going to do this, but I think.
Okay, you're going off script.
I'm going off script. Are you comfortable with that?
Of course.
Yeah. So I mentioned I was part of the Tableau community for a couple of years. I love Tableau Public in particular, because, and just confirmation, everybody can see my Tableau Public profile, correct?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So it's like play for me. I get to create art. I get to create data art from things that I love. And it's a bit of a hobby. I haven't done nearly as much of it as I would have liked this year, but for the last several years, I've just used Tableau Public as a sort of an outlet for me to play and be creative, create aesthetically pleasing designs. But with all that, little afterthought or pre-thought was really given to accessibility. So working with Emily in this regard was sort of a really good collaboration in the sense of I knew nothing about a lot of the things that I had no idea how deep the topic of accessibility was. And there were times where I said, hey, let's try this because I think it'd be great from best practices, from a aesthetic perspective. And Emily kind of checked me and said, wait, we can't, maybe shouldn't do it that way because we have to meet these accessibility requirements for the viz. So yeah, it was a really good collaboration, and we went through several iterations. And I'll turn it back over to you, Emily, to sort of go through the journey.
Yeah. Thank you, Christian, for providing that context, because yes, you are very much like a data artist, and I am not. So we solved that kind of second iteration. And that's what we presented to Team USA and said, okay, that first one, which had a lot of accessibility issues, and Team USA said, all right, let's see what else you can do. And that's where I went full on, like, again, the pendulum swung, and it was like, okay, how do we make this aesthetically pleasing? Christian comes on board, and I think one of the chart types, he was like, how about we do a map? And we do this. And I was like, oh yeah, that, like, screen readers are going to have a hard time with that though. And so Christian, like, I know you set it up with, you know, you came in, accessibility wasn't much of an afterthought, or was an afterthought in some of your work that you've done. What was the biggest challenge, do you think, in trying to make this product accessible?
Yeah, I think, so first of all, like a lot of the things like that we seem to, you know, particularly with the Olympics partnership, it was a short timeline. So time was a constraint. And then we had requirements from several different angles, right? Like you mentioned, Emily, we had the accessibility requirements, but we also had the Team USA style guide requirements that needed to be incorporated. And we had several sort of sizing constraints based off of how the dashboard is going to be consumed. And we wanted it to be engaging right off the bat because Team USA was going to show it potentially during an Olympic or Paralympic broadcast on their websites, through their social channels. So it was just this sort of, just this mingling of all these different sort of angles that we had to sort of hit the sweet spot on that made for it a really challenging ask, in my opinion.
I know when you, let me bring up that cringe viz one more time, just so that we can really, really see how Christian, kind of his brain works. So you came on board, you saw the cringe viz, and I mean, that's what I call it lovingly. What was your first thought in looking at this? Like from a design perspective, or to make it more aesthetically pleasing, outside of like the style guide, like the color from the style guide?
Yeah, I think, I don't know, just looking at like the table on the bottom, for example, seeing if we could sort of rearrange some of those aspects so they weren't sort of stacked on top of each other. And there was sort of a more organized visual flow to it was one of the initial thoughts. And even having all of those sort of filters across the top, if we can sort of bake that interactivity into the viz somehow, would have also been a consideration. So
yeah,
those were a couple things, but yeah.
I think one of the things that from our collaboration that like were really aha moments for me was that, you know, if we think about like if I think about some of the things I've learned, like, oh, build a dashboard from top to bottom. And so in my mind, I'm like, well, I have a flow here. I'm letting the person interact, and then everything else kind of changes.
Yeah.
And I also was like, I knew myself that I think I creatively peaked in Tableau around like 2014. So, you know, things like I've got a bar chart here, but I recall vividly like talking with you, and I think you had mentioned or we were talking, and then all of a sudden came this idea of like, oh, but we could do rounded bars. And I was like, oh, wait, like, yeah, actually that's a possibility. We'll get to where we landed in a minute, but it helped me. And that's why I say like the collaboration is for the win, because that helped me think outside of what I normally do and started, well, yeah, like like rounded bars. I'm pretty sure like that would work from an accessibility perspective, and it gives it like zhuzhes it up a little bit. Like it helped me think outside of how I normally think. And that for me was like a really great moment, because it helped me think a little more creatively. And I think for you, it was just the opposite, where it helped you go, okay, I have these constraints and I can't do all of this
I don't
aesthetic
like constraints.
artistry.
Yeah.
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 So it's like, what are the subtle things that we can do to sort of incrementally increase the design aesthetics while still meeting all of the requirements that need to be met from the accessibility standpoint?
Yeah. And I want to say, like, when Christian talked about the time frame, or like all of the constraints, like we were really under a lot. Like we didn't even have the data. So we just had sample data. And we didn't get the data, I think, until like the week before perhaps it was due. So there were like, it's hard to see exactly where you're going to go. For me, at least, it was hard to like really see it when I didn't even know what the data actually was going to look like.
Right.
Or what we
or
what we had.
It's like creativity takes time to percolate sometimes, it doesn't just, not always, but sometimes it does. And you absolutely didn't have that with this. So definitely a challenge.
Yeah. So this is where we landed. And the way that Christian and I worked was that like, I think, Christian, you went in, you took the cringe viz. Please don't hashtag that though. And like you started like working on it, you reorganized it to this general shape, I think, in terms of like what to put where. And then we just kind of worked back and forth with, doing some of the visualization. Like, I think it was really fantastic, because it was like, oh my gosh, I was like, Christian, thank you for doing this. Oh my gosh, this looks so great. And you were like, yeah, well, like you had like pretty much a lot of it there. It just needed to be like reorged.
Totally.
And one other point, like what we see here, like this is so clean. There's so much white space. It's way easier to read and to focus. There's not as much information there. We're giving people information, like we're giving them some direction. And I even had like one of my ahas was like these icons. These were more decorative. They were considered decorative icons because we had the labels. And so that was a really great learning point for me in terms of, oh, we can use icons. And if they're decorative, we don't have to worry about alt texting. But if they are something that like we don't have any other kind of description or anything else, like then we do need to worry about alt texting them. Because I was even going through like, oh, how are we going to alt text this? And so this is where we landed. And I think I know it's so much better than cringe viz. And it's a lot easier, I think, to see the information than where we originally started, and it's accessible. So,
and
Christian,
it matches everything else in terms of style guide for the most part, very closely, that we as Tableau and Salesforce had put out there, not just for the Paralympics, but for the Winter Olympics. And so that was a win as well. And so I just pasted a link in the chat that shows how Team USA, or one of the ways at least Team USA sort of broadcasts this effort and made it available to people who are interested on their website. So yeah, it was definitely a win.
So I put some takeaways in here, and Christian, please feel free to add any additional ones. But I think when we go from like where we started to where we landed, I think the big thing was assessing where we were at, identifying the things that we needed to resolve and the things that were okay. I used Chartability for that. And then I think the next thing is to iterate. So, sometimes you got to make a cringe viz to make a great viz. And then collaboration. That I think was so key for us because what Florian had done wouldn't have passed the accessibility standards. What I had done wouldn't have, I mean, there were some things I needed to tweak, obviously, but that wouldn't have passed from like a marketability and a visual aesthetic perspective. And we looked at this as a new learning opportunity. I got to say, okay, how can I learn from Christian in terms of like how I can do bar charts differently and still accessible. I recall, Christian, one of the things that when I wrote that bullet point out around new learning opportunities, you were like, okay, so this is great. Like I get to think about this as a challenge and how can I make something beautiful and accessible? And that stuck with me, you saying that. And I think
it definitely was. It was definitely a challenge, but totally worth it.
And I think, I have this here as a pro tip, but know who you are. Like I'm the blocky business type person, so that you can collaborate with the right type of person, i.e. the creative thinker like Christian, to make the best product possible. Christian, do you have any other takeaways from this journey?
No, I think you've captured it and summed it up really well. And just take those opportunities to collaborate because there's always opportunities to share knowledge you have and learn from others.
So Christian, I have to ask, I've got to put you on the spot for just a second. Have you thought about accessibility when doing any other visualizations since then?
Gosh, I have more. I haven't, in my role, it's a lot of, it's not really a lot of development. So I don't get a chance to do a lot of the work that I was doing for the last, 6 or 7 years. So I just haven't been doing as much. But I definitely will after, taking away the knowledge that I gained from working with you, Emily. So thank you.
It was a joint effort and it was really exciting to be a part of that project. So thanks, Christian, for coming on and sharing your perspective in this, because I think you represent a lot of people out there. And I think it'll be all great when we're on this accessibility journey. So cool. I hope that use case that we shared was helpful. I haven't been able to look at the chat, so I'll go in now and look at that. But Colin, I'll turn it back over to you. Oh, unless there are questions. I am so sorry. I was like so into the zone. I forgot to ask about questions. Let me look at the chat and see.
I would have one.
Okay.
I guess my main question, and it's sort of a trap, is would you say that the end result is aesthetically on par with the original viz?
No, I don't think it. I don't think it is. Although I would argue that I find the initial visualization to not be usable for me. So I think this can actually, so thank you for the question. I think that this can set up the next section really nicely. Because one of the things that I am obsessed with, I know Sarah hears it all the time, working with me, but I'm obsessed with knowing your audience and knowing your user. And Team USA knows their user. And so they knew that what we presented at first was not going to work. And so they were very clear about having, I think they even may have used a phrase that I've used oftentimes of like, give the data space to breathe, to let people consume it. So was it visually, was it as much or as creative in terms of like the different types of visuals used. No. And that's okay, because this was a very clean, clean viz. And I'll tell you, like that circle plot, one of the things that's an issue. Thank you so much, Christian. One of the issues with that was that the data overlaps, but there wasn't borders. So when you're, it's always good to have like a 1 pixel piece of white space between overlapping data so people can really distinguish it. So there were challenges with visual viz, and it was just so much in one space. So yeah, I would say it's not, and that's okay. So sorry if I was too wordy with that, but I think it's okay for it not to be on the same level, because it's serving two different, it's like it's two different audiences, really.
Yeah, thank you for the answer. The reason I was asking, and the reason I was saying it's a bit of a trap question, is that I often find that trying to make Tableau accessible it very often comes with trade-offs in terms of the level and the level of aesthetics and creativity that you can achieve, or the level of visual creativity, because you do need a lot of creativity to make Tableau work accessibly. But it's just, I don't think the incentives, especially on Tableau Public, are there for most people to make their creations accessible.
That is a really great point. I would 100% agree with you there. Oh my gosh, we could get like totally sidetracked on that conversation. I was going to say, if you haven't already, please read Christy Martini's blog post. I'll try to find it, or Chris, if you have it handy, please post it in the chat, because what I love is, and Chris and I have chatted about this, where I am I'm very basic and simple with my visualizations. So for me, it's a lot easier to make my visuals, my dashboards more accessible, because I start out from the basics and the heuristics are set up so that it encourages more beautiful, simplistic visuals versus the novel visualizations, because then you have to do more work in order to make it more accessible. Chris, though, I think in one of his blog posts, all I can think about is like the flips. He has a viz, it's like flipping chips, I think. I forget. In my mind, I can kind of see it. And I think Frank also, the coin flip, thank you, Chris. And I think Frank also took a look at that one from a review of using Chartability. I think that one is a great one for folks on Tableau Public, especially to look at that blog post, because you can see like some of what Chris encountered and his thought process, whereas like, you know what, you're going to see me do a bar chart, a line chart, maybe a slope graph if I'm like feeling crazy one day. So it's not going to be the same kind of thing. And that's okay. We need all of these voices in this community, because like we all present something different. So I'll pause here, but thank you so much for that question and those statements.
Thank you.
So Colin, I'll turn it over to you. Sorry, we ran a little,
That's fine.
we took up
I think
our
it's
space.
great questions and great conversation.
Yeah.
So
Christy,
what I'm gonna go into now, I think, is the idea of universal design, and I'm gonna move relatively quickly through this because I want us to have some time at the end just to reflect back about what we'd want to see, coming next from this accessibility tug. Let me share my screen. All right. So when I'm thinking about universal design Tableau, I mean, a lot of this stuff is going to reflect really well on what Christian and Emily have just been talking about with that Paralympic viz. You know, where I want to start is just kind of what does it mean to be accessible when it comes to Tableau? So, you know, this is really back to like basic definitions, right? You know, accessibility is ensuring that as many people as possible can use, understand, and have access to our visualizations. I find that coming back to that idea helps me direct where I want to go when I'm trying to design for accessibility. And I think we can all give ourselves a little bit of credit, you know, because data visualization in itself is a form of accessibility technology. If you think about how accessible a table of numbers is, you know, big spreadsheet, right, in Excel, trying to gain some sort of meaning from that. Very few people can look at a table like that and gain meaning, right? So as we're thinking about accessibility as, you know, making sure as many people can use, understand, have access to data, data visualization is a huge accessibility tool, right? So I think sometimes it's helpful in this conversation, you know, we can get a little down on ourselves, like, oh, I messed up this, I messed up that, I need to fix that, you know, but at the same time, we can give ourselves a little bit of a pat on the back from, you know, just being in the space of data visualization is already in the space of accessibility. And then there's this idea of universal design. I love this quote by Kyle Waterhouse, who's the accessibility project manager at Alteryx, which is a data preparation software. I'll just read it out here. Universal design is the idea that you design for everyone. You don't just design for normal users. Quotes around that, normal users. At the same time, you don't just design for users of assistive technology. You design for everyone who could possibly use it. A good example of this is you don't build stairs up to a door and then bolt a ramp onto the side. You create stairs that incorporate a ramp, something that's pleasing to the eye and also serves all the needs of anybody who could use it. So when we're thinking about universal design, I find it helpful to think about examples outside of the realm of data visualization. So here's just a few examples. You might have noticed that we have captioning on in this Zoom call. That's one example of closed captioning. If you're thinking narrowly about why we have closed captioning, you could think, oh, maybe it's for people who are deaf, right? Or who are hard of hearing. But there's a whole universe of other reasons you might need closed captioning, right? Maybe you are in a library, right? And you want to be able to hear it, but you don't have headphones, right? Maybe you're in a crowded bar watching a sports game and you can't hear the commentary, but you want to be able to see it, right? So even though we tend to think of these things as designed for a particular kind of user, there's a whole universe of other people that can be benefited from it. Another example is curb cuts, right? These are required by the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, so that people with wheelchairs can get down to the street level and back up to the sidewalk level. But again, it doesn't just help people in wheelchairs, right? It helps people who are, you know, carrying their groceries in a little cart. It helps people who have a baby with them in a stroller, right? There's a variety of reasons that go beyond just the immediate user that you might be thinking of when you're designing it. So then how does this look in Tableau? So this is a chart that I built in Tableau. It's our favorite superstore. And while this is sort of a simple, clean looking viz, there's actually a lot of stuff that I've done here underneath to make this more accessible. And this is just in terms of the formatting. So I guess what I want to do is if people want to either unmute or drop in the chat, anything that they see in this viz that they think is an element of universal design. Ziffa says captions. Yes, so there's a caption underneath that I've chosen to show. Double encoding of shape and color. Right, yeah, thanks Roshni. So Roshni knows that the marks are different shapes. So I'm not just relying on the color of this line to distinguish them, to distinguish it from the others. I'm also overlaying a shape. Labels for the line ends, right. So oftentimes people who are keyboard only users can't access the underlying tooltips in a viz. So it's helpful to label those marks. You can see I've labeled the final mark here with both the name of the category as well as the value. Emily also says instructions at the top. Yep. So just below the title, I've also included some instructions for how not only to access the tooltips, but also if you can't use the tooltips, how to get to that underlying data window, this is like the most critical keyboard shortcut for accessibility in Tableau, I think, is Control-Shift-Enter. That's what brings up the view underlying data window where people can actually use a screen reader to go through the values that the marks represent. Anything else people notice? Yes, Christy. Christy had a question. Tooltips are not accessible to screen readers, correct? Yes, that's correct. Screen readers cannot read what's going on in a tooltip. So I'm just gonna note some of these things. Some of these you got, some of them are additional. So labeling the line directly in a high contrast color. So rather than labeling the same color as the line, labeling it in black on white, which is a nice contrast. The colors are a colorblind accessible palette. So not every single user would be able to distinguish these colors, but they avoid some of the more common colors that are confused. We got this one, Roshni, labeling the mark in multiple ways. I've also made the text size larger. It's a little bit hard to notice out of its dashboard context, but I've bumped up the sizing of this text to size 12 font instead of relying on the Tableau defaults. I've also bumped up the size of the marks from the default. We are avoiding the visual overload of having too many marks, colors, or categories. I've aggregated to the quarter level. I've also aggregated it up to the category level so that we don't get too many lines at cross purposes here. Captions, that was noticed by Ziffa. Showing the most recent value, that was noticed by Emily, as well as the instructions about how to interact and see the underlying labels. So even in a chart that seems simple on its surface, there can actually be a lot of formatting choices that we make to make this more accessible. I think a lot of universal design becomes invisible because it just works, right? We don't really notice curb cuts every time we walk on them, but they certainly help out our lives and the lives of others. And that's kind of what I'm thinking about here when I think about universal design. I love quotes from people who are advanced in this field of accessibility. So here's another one. This is from Doug Sheppers, who's the director of Fizz Studio. And I love this as just a way to position what we do. And I was struck by, I think it was when Istvan said, maybe we don't have the same level of aesthetic creativity or visual creativity, but it certainly takes a high degree of creativity to be able to do this kind of work in accessibility. So I think this kind of reflects that same sentiment. Don't look at this and list meaning accessibility as a requirement, an obligation, or another checkbox to tick off. Look at accessibility as an opportunity to hone your skills, to move beyond the ordinary, and to provide an intentional experience for your users. And then one more quote. I love these. This is from Ben Schneiderman, who's the founding director of the Human-Computer Interaction Lab. The purpose of visualization is insight, not pictures, right? And again, I find this a really grounding principle when we're doing this accessibility work, right? The reason we create data visualizations in the first place is to help people find insight, right? So what can we do to create the kind of experience that drives even more insight? We're not here just to make pictures with data. We're here to create insight with data. And visualization is just one of many ways that we can do that. All right. So we're nearing the end of our time, but I do want to have just maybe 2 or 3 minutes of discussion. Again, this can be, if you want to unmute yourself or if you want to drop ideas in the chat. What would you like to see from this allied tug, this accessibility tug coming forward. Emily and I plan to run this quarterly for the next year. So if there's any ideas that you have, I do just want to open up the floor. These could be specific topics that you want to hear about, people that you think we should bring in, or anything else. I'll open the floor.
I'd hope to hear some just basic accessibility wins that someone can do like in their biz, and how we can teach that to other data viz designers. I think that, and that's kind of how I kind of came into data viz and accessibility and usability together. It was just, there's a lot of people out there creating, as one of those quotes says, pretty pictures, and not realizing that there's a whole lot more to it. And you've got to be thoughtful about every single design decision that you make, because it can impact someone's ability to see or understand or get that insight. So some, like, I'm thinking like just like a basic, like, here's 10 tips 10 tips that let's like walk through them and show them in reality, and maybe do some like that, before and afters, that sort of thing.
Yeah, love that idea.
I'd say perhaps a case study or some examples of how someone, an institution or someone at an institution impacted the branding standards for an organization to make them more accessible. I know we have very strong branding standards where I am. I'm sure a lot of institutions do. And obviously that is one of those constraints that everyone has to work in, and some of those can be more accessible or not. So perhaps perhaps something in that realm would be awesome.
And maybe even if you don't have any, or if you have branding standards but not like a style guide, like how can you incorporate that accessibility or universal design concepts into that style guide or branding guide as you build it? So it's not just I'm fixing something after the fact, but how can I be thoughtful from the beginning?
I'm writing these all down on my phone. That's why you see me looking down and looking like I'm texting.
I haven't had the opportunity to actually see how some of the market leader adaptive technology works. So I haven't actually seen a screen reader work through Tableau. I don't know if other people have. I think I could probably track that down, but if that's something that other people need, that might be really interesting.
Yeah, thank you, Christy. That was what I was going to ask, if that would be really cool if something like that was possible, to just kind of see it happen in real life, how it works, because I've never used it and I really would like to be conscious of that when I'm creating visualizations moving forward. So that would be really cool if something like that could happen. Thank you, Christy, for bringing that up.
Oh, and I see Aaron here has put in into the chat, maybe some deep dives into some different audiences and the challenges those audience might have. I think that's a great idea.
Definitely. Awesome. These are all great ideas. If you have other ideas, I think just tweeting it, if you're on Twitter with that hashtag A11YTUG, then I'm sure Emily and I will see it and can think about incorporating it into a next one. These are really good ideas.
I know we are at time, but just a super quick question. You can get back to us either LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever. Where, like, we'd like to set up a group, knowing that maybe not everybody is on Twitter, or maybe you all are. Should we just start with like a Twitter using the hashtag Slack? I see. Yeah. So like, is a Slack channel preferable? LinkedIn group? If you let us know that, we will build it. So
and hopefully you all will come.
Build it and they will come. Yeah.
Oh, Ethan's got a great idea, which is leading into my next thing, which is accessibility data viz challenge. As a matter of fact, I'm designing one of these right now. a little accessibility cameo for Workout Wednesday. If any of you are familiar with Workout Wednesday or not, it's a weekly data challenge, dashboarding challenge in Tableau. You can find it workout-wednesday.com. The week of October 5th, we are going to be doing an accessibility dashboard. So this is not the final product, but it's on the way of what I'm making. So look out for that.
Colin, here's my little hack for that. If you run out of time, just use the executive overview. That's what I've done. That ships with Tableau because that has some accessibility challenges in it already.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so this is just a sneak peek to let you know that that's going to be coming up on the week of October 5th.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a Wednesday, I think, October 5th. All right, cool. Finally, to those of you who are still here, Emily's made an awesome badge that you're encouraged to share on your socials. Emily, do you want to give a pitch for that?
Yes. So we have our tug logo, and we wanted to celebrate you all for joining this first tug, and trying to also have a little bit of marketing here. So yes, please, we would love it if you downloaded this. You should be able to scan the QR code. I've put the link in the chat, and that should link you right to the image where you can just download it from Google Drive. I checked to make sure I'm pretty sure I checked to make sure that it was visible by everyone. So yes, we want to celebrate you. We want everybody else in your network to know that you are interested in accessibility, because that helps us grow that community and affect change. So thank you. I hope you download it, scan it, download it, share it. And then also, Colin, if you share that last slide, share your takeaways. Like, what's something that you learned today? Like, share that on social. We would love to read them. You can always use the hashtag A11Y tug. A11Y is the shortcut for accessibility. So yeah, share your takeaways. We'd love to hear them. And I'm excited to see how this community grows. Thank you everyone for joining today and helping us kick off this tug.
Yeah, and if you're watching this later on and you weren't here live, I'm not going to gatekeep. You can definitely still share this badge, even if you weren't here live. All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming. And we hope to see you next time. It should be in December.
Yeah.
All
Thank
right.
you all so much. Have a great rest of your week.
Mm-hmm.